Join Boise State Public Radio for a concert with blues rock guitarist and vocalist Coco Montoya at the Treefort Music Hall in Boise, February 13th, with reserved seating. A night with Coco Montoya and his band. Find details and a link for tickets at boisestatepublicradio.org.
From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Gemma Gaudette. This is Idaho Matters. Can birdwatching lower your stress and make you feel better? Well, that's the question one Idaho-born professor wanted to answer with a new study. He found that not only is birdwatching an easily accessible hobby, but it lowers psychological stress. So here to tell us more about this is Boise State Public Radio reporter Abigail Moody. Abby, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Gemma.
Okay, so tell us about this study. Let's start with who is the professor that did this?
Yeah, totally. So Nils Peterson, he is with North Carolina State University. Like you said, he was born in Idaho. He was born in Driggs and had family here. So he spent a lot of time in kind of that more rural, wildlife-rich environment. And then just through the course of his life, got interested into wildlife research. And then when the pandemic hit, he and some other colleagues that also had wildlife research backgrounds all kind of came together and were wondering, okay, how does nature affect people's well-being? And so they started with a study just looking at purely nature-based, how does it affect it? And then in 2023, they came up with a study looking at how wildlife could affect your well-being.
Okay, so how exactly did this study work? Because he looked at, 3 groups of college students? So talk to us about that and what each group did.
Yeah, so he did look at college students, but he also allowed faculty and other people at the university to join in. So yes, there were college-age students, but there were also older adults and whatnot. The study length was 10 weeks long, and it was split up into 2 parts. Pretty much you would get put into a control group where you wouldn't change anything in your habits. You would just continue business as usual, or you would be put into a treatment group. The 2 treatments he had was kind of homework. So the first treatment group had to go for a weekly walk in the forest for at least 30 minutes. And then the second treatment group had to do the exact same, but actively birdwatch. And then after the 5 weeks, he would flip them. So people that were in the treatment groups then went into a control group and vice versa.
Okay, so then how did he measure the stress level of each group?
Yeah, so it was on self-reported data. So he was really more interested in how are people analyzing with themselves, how their emotions are changing with birdwatching, or if they are. So kind of like looking with metacognition, how they're reporting with themselves. So he wasn't strapping these different devices to people's heads and having them go walk. It was really, do this for 5 weeks. And at the end, tell me how you're feeling. And the 2 things that they were looking at were psychological well-being and psychological stress. And what they found were that with the groups that were doing the birdwatching, psychological well-being went up the most, and psychological stress went down the most. It was still definitely prominent with the forest walking group, but the bird watchers had the highest levels.
Okay, so Professor Peterson, this is what he found out, right? That the bird watching really does help with your stress level.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And, he talked about other studies that he's seen on this kind of same field of just nature helping with well-being. And some studies totally get out the gadgets, look at brain activity, things like that. And he found that even just with self-reporting that, yes, there is a noticeable increase in well-being when you are participating in these weekly habits.
So let's talk about the part that you said that they also saw some differences in well-being when it was just those folks that walked. So Professor Peterson found that group that just went walking in nature also had lower stress levels. So it sounds like, maybe nature is the key when it maybe comes to helping our mental health?
Yeah. Just engaging with nature alone can definitely help with well-being. But what they found was when people are interacting with wildlife, that their well-being could be increased even more. And since bird watching is something that most people could do either by visually watching for the birds, listening for the birds, things like that. And that was the wildlife activity that they chose to study. So it could, could this transfer to other wildlife activities? Sure, that's what we chatted about. But their group was mostly focused on bird watching just because of its accessibility.
Mm-hmm. So how did they find out how much bird watching did for the group? I mean, I'm curious about how much that bird watching you would need to do to kind of de-stress.
Such as like timeline, is that what you're asking?
Correct.
Okay. No, they weren't really looking for a specific time. Each person had the minimum requirement of 30 minutes a week. But some people definitely went above that. And so he said that his average time that he found people walking and bird watching was like 45 minutes a week. So really not a lot of time every week to see those benefits.
Mm-hmm. I only ask that because I'd be that kind of person that put my watch on and be like, okay, 30 minutes. Let's see how my mood is.
Yeah, maybe in the future there will be, that golden study where now doctors can prescribe bird watching in certain amounts each week. But right now it's just showing that around this time we can see an improvement in your well-being.
So Professor Peterson was also interested in college students for this study. And I find this part interesting. This had to do with the impact of the COVID pandemic and other stressors that they face. So is bird watching in Professor Peterson's studies, did he find that bird watching is an easy and frankly an inexpensive way for students to not just relax, but Abby, deal with some of those stressors?
Oh, totally. Yeah, bird watching is really interesting, especially depending on your geographic location, because you possibly would not even have to go on a walk to do bird watching. If you're in a pretty forested environment, even if it's urban and there's bird activity, you could pop up a chair and just bird watch out your window. For those that are wanting to get out in nature and have that added benefit, it is very doable. I think of Boise in general, and we have several parks that I can think of that are great birding options for people. And they're right by the university. You hop on the greenbelt, you can go bird watching. So yes, definitely accessible and free. Really all it's going to cost is some endurance for the cold, depending on the season, and, a good pair of walking shoes.
Well, look, I like to watch my cat bird watch from our windows in our living room.
Definitely.
Because, it's kind of he thinks he's a mighty beast, right?
So, yes.
So I do have to say, in that regard, you're right. Just sitting in my living room and even just watching, another animal watch the birds. I would say it's kind of relaxing. So with all that said, I want to talk about the fact that you've also reported on Idaho Fish and Game's interactive birding trail map. So talk to us a little about this for folks who may not even know that something like this exists.
Totally. Yeah. Well, it was kind of funny because the whole reason why I started this story was because I wanted to assemble a bird watching resource for our listeners. And then I found that one was already assembled. So the Idaho Birding Trail, it's a great website put on by Idaho Fish and Game. It's an interactive map that has 4 different regions. So northern Idaho, southwestern Idaho, and, et cetera. It has over 2,000 miles of trails collectively put on there. Wow. And you can go on there, look at your region. You can zoom in really detailed to see even, street names. So you can look on a very small scale level where you're willing to travel. Click the different colored bubbles for the different trails. And it'll even tell you what birds you should keep an eye out for and what birds have been reported to be there. It gives you directions on how to get there for some of the more rural trails. And so it's a really awesome resource. I definitely think that our listeners should look into it.
Okay, before I let you go, have you gone bird watching?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I actually have a large history with birds, growing up with them and then working in rehabilitation with them. So yes, I'm an avid bird watcher.
And in all seriousness, do you feel better afterward?
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. No, I'm finishing up my degree right now in biology, and I have to go bird watching several times a week to be able to, feel nice and calmed. And luckily, with BSU, we've got the great Greenbelt and, lots of resources for us.
What a great story, Abby. Thanks so much. It's been great talking with you.
Thanks for having me.
I'm Gemma Gaudette, and this is Idaho Matters.
Each morning, it's a new opportunity, a chance to start fresh. Up First from NPR makes each morning an opportunity to learn and to understand. Choose to join the world every morning with Up First, a podcast that hands you everything going on across the globe and down the street, all in 15 minutes or less. Start your day informed and anew with Up First by subscribing wherever you get your podcasts.